Now, before I talk about NXT this week, which I actually was able to successfully watch the first go round on the WWE Network, let's plug some crap, shall we? Make sure you tune in Sunday, March 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern to the OTRS Central podcast on Blog Talk Radio, where I will be joined by my very special guest, the Solomonster. We're going to talk about all types of good stuff. The link for that show is in the description box down below. Make sure also that you check out, if you haven't started to already, the WrestleMania review series. I think, if anything, it gives you some good insight into the history of WrestleMania, lets you know where I stand on the history of WrestleMania and some of the different shows and different memorable moments. And if anything, maybe serves to get you ramped up and a little more excited for WrestleMania coming up next Sunday. That link to that playlist is in the description box down below, as is the show's Twitter handle at OTRS Central. Make sure you give it a follow. And also make sure you like the new Facebook page for OTRS Central. That information is in the description box down below. Now let's talk about NXT for this week. With NXT reviews, I do want to kind of let you know that since this is a developmental territory, there will be weeks where maybe I will just focus strictly on the show itself and how the show actually was. There will be weeks where I primarily maybe will only focus on character development and how those characters are being utilized, how they're being presented, how they're being positioned, whether or not those characters are going to translate to the main roster, if they're going to work on the main roster. And that might be all I focus on. Sometimes it'll be a hybrid of a combination of things. And that's kind of what you'll get with this week's review. I'll talk about elements of the show, but I will also talk about the characters and in some cases and whether or not I like them or what I envision for them. Now, I did like how the show kicked off right away with a match, just bam, right into it. It was Mojo Rawley versus CJ Parker. And I like this position to start off a show in an amped up way by bringing out the guy that doesn't get hyped. He stays hyped in a Mojo Rawley. Now, when I look at Mojo Rawley, I see a guy that still has a lot of work to do in the ring in terms of being a WWE ready performer. But I see that natural spark. I see that natural charisma, potentially that it factor that would allow him to become a star. I think this is a nice type of simplistic gimmick to give him, something that is energetic, something that is different, something that is up-tempo. And I think it can potentially translate to the main roster. I think he needs to change some of his moveset. I, in particular, think that his finishing move is fucking stupid. But hey, that is stuff that maybe they will change, and I hope they will change over time. But there is some stuff to like about a Mojo Rawley, and I do think the character could potentially translate to the main roster. There might need to be some tweaks along the way. It'll translate to the main roster, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm just not sure if he's the type of guy that'll just have a spot on the main roster or he'll have one of those spots on the main roster. As far as CJ Parker goes, excuse me, if he's supposed to be this freaking hippie, this moonchild, this child of love, and this fucking hippie and all this other crap, then why the hell is his name CJ Parker? That is not a fucking moonchild hippie name. I don't give a shit what anybody says. That in no way sounds like a hippie or moon-loving name at all. And if the name doesn't match what the character's supposed to be about, well, damn it all, then the rest of the character to me is kind of stupid, and I think the rest of the character is kind of stupid. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to having a character with this type of concept, but clearly, this is one that needs to go back to the drawing board, at least in my opinion. Then we get Xavier Woods versus Tyler Breeze, and they actually wrestled. They actually had a match, which I was disappointed. I'm like, damn it all, Tyler Breeze should have the type of gimmick where he never fucking wrestles. But I will say, I like the fact that he makes a big deal about not touching the face, but I think they need to go farther with that. It needs to extend to the hair. Don't touch the hair. I told you could do all these other things, but I told you this is the moneymaker. Don't hit me in the face and don't touch the hair. That's a gimmick even of itself. They had him go over Xavier Woods here, and that's all fine and good. I like the Tyler Breeze gimmick and character. I'm going to be as blunt, honest as I possibly can be. I wish it wasn't on another guy that was under 200 pounds. You can blast me if you want, but that is one thing that I notice in this developmental territory right now, that a lot of these guys are very similar in size and very similar in look. Now, I would say the same thing if everybody was 6'5", 300 pounds. There's got to be variety. There's got to be spice. And even if you dress them up a little bit differently, they can all still ultimately kind of look the same and feel the same. And a Tyler Breeze feels like so many other guys on that freaking roster. Guys that aren't super tall, they aren't super muscular, they aren't super big in size. You got too many of these guys. I love the gimmick, though, of Tyler Breeze, and I think this guy does a really good job with this gimmick. I just wish that they weren't having Xavier Woods on NXT, that they would actually be giving him some type of assorted push on the main roster. Then we get something that follows off of a couple weeks ago, a return match between Yoshi, Tatsu, and Corey Graves, Now, I'm perfectly fine with the Yoshi Tatsu being here because, let's face it, he's not on the freaking main roster, and this is what you should be doing. Taking guys that in theory should be better, that have been on the main roster, and bringing them onto NXT to work with these guys that haven't been, so that way they can learn, they can improve, they can get better. The way they get better is to work with people in the ring that are better than them. The way to get experience is to get experience. But as far as Corey Graves, I see where there's talent there, but this mother humper kind of reminds me of Boy George, or George Michael or something. This whole thing about stay down. What the fuck does stay down mean? Now, to be fair, maybe I've missed something because I've only recently started watching NXT. But what the hell is stay down supposed to mean? What the hell is with his stonewashed pants and his dumb hair and all that? Yeah, and me, of all people, talking about somebody's dumb hair. I see a kid with talent. I see a kid that could do something. But I see a kid that is being packaged in a way that is just completely ridiculous. It seems like he rolled out of the poor man's version of a Hot Topic. I'm just telling you. I don't see where Corey Graves is anything. What the fuck is a Corey Graves? And again, like I said, I'm going to emphasize this sometimes, some weeks a lot, because that's ultimately what this show is about. It's about maybe in some ways giving an alternative type of product, but also preparing these guys ultimately for the main roster. Now, with this show, you actually had 5 matches on the card, which maybe you could have done without one of these matches and only had 4 for the hour. But if they know that the intended audience is going to be more of that hardcore, serious internet fan that's going to prefer more in-ring action and less of the other bullshit, then maybe that's fine. And I really didn't have a problem with them having 5 matches on this card. I may have preferred that they only had 4, but 5, I'm not going to complain too much because at least you could say, it was a show filled with a lot of wrestling. And one thing I really like about NXT is how they actually let their women go out there and actually perform and actually put on a real match. It was really good to see Bret Hart come out with Natalya. It's always good to see Sasha Banks come out with Charlotte. But Charlotte, Natalya, good match. Good match. Type of match that we'd be very pleased to see on a Raw or a SmackDown most weeks. You know, Charlotte has some potential. And Natalya, again, this is an example of bringing somebody from the active roster that is better than a Charlotte, having her work with a Charlotte to help Charlotte improve and grow and get better. That's the whole purpose of this. To me, having all these matches with NXT guy versus NXT guy doesn't make a whole lot of sense because they're not really learning. How are you going to learn from somebody that's at the same level as you? The only way you're going to learn with this type of thing is to get better by facing those that are better than you that can actually teach you stuff. And Natalya working with somebody like a Charlotte here is outstanding. Only thing I wish we would have had is we would have had Ric Flair in Charlotte's corner, because I would have just loved to have seen the looks exchange back and forth between Rick and Bret. A really good match here. Sasha Banks gets involved, and hey, it's all good. And we get to the main event. And, you know, this is one of these things that they're trying to, I think in some ways, see how some of these guys can actually be holding a title on the main roster. Now, is Bo Dallas ever necessarily going to hold the title on the main roster? Probably not. But maybe they envision Adrian Neville as that type of guy someday. So at least if anything else, they give some importance for these guys, and they're giving them a reason to really go out there and try and beat the hell out of each other by wrestling for this NXT title. It is a preparation in a lot of ways for what they would experience on the main roster. And this match here actually worked for me more than the ladder match at NXT Arrival last month. And part of the reason for that was, you know, when they bill Adrian Neville as the man that gravity forgot or whatever, I didn't really see a lot of that in a freaking ladder match of all things. I saw a lot more of those elements that fit into the billing of the performer in this match here. So it worked a lot better for me. and I thought it was a good match and a good finish. Not anything too overcomplicated, not anything spectacular, just an effective show this week. I did like the way in general it was presented, even if I said I would like 4 matches instead of 5 on this card. I thought 5 matches in an hour show was maybe a little too much. But you started off with the right guy with Mojo Rawley. You gave us a really good Divas match between Charlotte and Natalya, even if there was the occasional botch by a Charlotte here. You have to expect that sometimes, I guess. And then you got a solid main event title match between Bo Dallas and Adrian Neville. Solid show here. I do want to point out again that you guys need to check out that podcast coming up Sunday, March 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern on Blog Talk Radio, where I'm going to be joined by my special guest, the Solid Monster. We're going to talk about Batista. We're going to talk about Daniel Bryan and WrestleMania 30 and some other assorted WrestleMania topics, and maybe even answer some of your questions. Make sure you like the new Facebook page. You follow the show on Twitter. Check out the WrestleMania review series. And also make sure you check out my good friend from the British Fist, Mr. Parkin. He does NXT reviews. He was one of the first people I knew of that was reviewing NXT each and every single week consistently. He might think he was the first. He might not have been the first per se, but he was one of the first that I know of anyways. And I think he does solid NXT reviews. He takes pride in it. And as a result, since he takes pride in it, you should take pride in checking him out. I will put the link to his channel where he does the NXT reviews in the description box down below, and you could go tell him the Schleg Daddy sent him and no hard feelings, but sorry, the Schleg Daddy's taking over the NXT game now. No hard feelings. All right, guys. Let me know what you thought of the show down below. I thought it was okay this week.